Well, I'm happy to say that the younger generation is a generation of doers. It's not that they're not a generation of thinkers. They can think very, very well, but they've come to understand that thinking about something is not enough. Those of us who are a little bit older generation tend to think and think and think, but maybe never move actually to action. We measure 6 times and maybe never cut. The younger generation needs that foundation of study and grounding, but it has to be more than that. We have to move into actually equipping into ministry skills and training toward obedience into what Christ has taught us. What the church needs now, more than anything, are practitioners. We study and we study and we study. We come to church and we go to Bible class and we go into worship and we have a sermon and then we go to Sunday night class and then we go to small group and then we come back for Wednesday night class and study, 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 study. We can absolutely become spiritually obese. We have to get to spiritual movement. We have to be equipped into spiritual practice, to see the potential energy of the church turn into kinetic energy, to watch all of this study, all this theological grounding move us into something more than just being right, to move us into life-changing ministry into the world. Now go to the example of Jesus. He discipled his disciples to teach accurate theology. As he went around teaching parables, as he went around teaching about the kingdom, and you go into the things that they went out and taught, they were teaching what they heard from Jesus. They were teaching what they saw embodied in Jesus. But Jesus didn't just send them to teach, he sent them to go and make disciples, which included teaching. And what we sometimes have done, and maybe too frequently, is we have focused on the teaching, but not on the going and doing. And we've really missed something there. It's not that we need to neglect teaching, it's that we need to take teaching and put it in its proper context. Take the Great Commission. Jesus says, go into all the nations and make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. That's action. You have to go, you have to baptize. And then he says, and to teach. Teach them to obey everything I've commanded you. He doesn't just say, teach them to know everything I've commanded you. He says, teach them to obey everything that I have commanded you. Jesus wants robust disciples who have accurate, truthful theological grounding in the scriptures and the teachings of Jesus in the New Testament at this point in time, and also practitioners. What the church does not need are more theoreticians. The church has plenty of theoreticians. We need theoreticians. We need solidly grounded, biblically exegeted, hermeneutically sound doctrine, right? We don't neglect sound teaching. It's just that sound teaching in and of itself is not enough to be the kind of disciple that Jesus made. So if you go to the Gospels and you look at how Jesus made disciples, as we're entering into a season here in wineskins of equipping, Jesus made disciples by teaching them so they could teach, and that their teaching would be accurate and truthful and biblical. Jesus also discipled them to be goers and doers. So by the time we get to Luke 9 and 10, we see the sending of the 72, we see the sending of the 12, and Jesus gives them very specific instructions. He says, go into these villages and proclaim the gospel of the kingdom, heal the diseases, drive out the demons, cure the sick. So go teach and do, minister and instruct. And so the disciples, they go, they do, they come back and they said, we said all the things that you've been saying and we taught, and we did all the things that we've seen you doing. That's the definition of a disciple. A disciple is someone who's being apprenticed in the ways of their rabbi, their master, to be able to teach the rabbi's teaching, because the rabbis had specific teaching. Jesus had a specific teaching. We need to know that teaching. That's Great Commission, to teach them to know everything I've commanded you, but not just to know it. No, to teach them to obey everything I've commanded you. And so we have to be practical practitioners, not just theoreticians. The church is full of theoreticians. We have enough, okay? And so we have we spent years, we spent decades, generations laying a solid doctrinal foundation from the scriptures to do what with? To say, we finally understand it, we're going to perpetuate this teaching. See, that's not what Jesus did. That was not his example, and that was not his final instruction. So if you follow the example of Jesus, if we want to follow the example of Jesus and we want to be biblical, then we're going to learn the teachings of Jesus, to teach the teachings of Jesus, and we also need to be doing the things Jesus did. And if we don't know how to do the things that Jesus did, then we need to be equipped, trained to learn how to do the things that Jesus did, being benevolent, being loving and kind, treating people with mercy and respect, being a friend of sinners, going to dinner with questionable people, the good news of the kingdom. All these things Jesus did, we need to be doing, because he demonstrated that to his apostles, who then, which an apostle means a sent one, they went. They're people of action. They went out and did and said what Jesus did and said, and that is our example. Jesus' example was passed to them to be passed to us. Please hang with me here. Over the next several months, we're going to be laying the foundation to coach and teach and instruct on how to be a practitioner of Jesus' ministry in the world today, so that we can be the kind of disciples that Jesus was making, to teach what Jesus taught, the gospel of the kingdom, to do what Jesus did, acts of love and compassion in the world, to seek and save the lost, to find the lost sheep, to build each other up, right? These are the kind of things that Jesus has instructed, and Jesus gave an example of, like washing feet, being a servant to all, right? Showing love and compassion, showing humility and mercy, an example of obedience to the Father, even to the point of death, Philippians chapter 2. These are the kinds of things that we need to be instructed in, coached in, trained in, to fulfill 1 Peter chapter 2 that says we are a priesthood of all believers. That means that we all have a royal priestly responsibility to minister in the world. And when the church, when we get this message and implement, execute with intentionality, focus, and purpose, with efficiency and effectiveness, because we're doing it Jesus' way, empowered by the Holy Spirit, not because we just have a method, then we're going to see an effect. We're going to see a result. And as we walk that path, just as Jesus' disciples walked that path, we're going to learn that we have to rely on him in everything, that this is not by our own power and ability. This is not by our own smarts. This is not because we've got it all right. This is not because we got just the right approach. It's because we are doing and being and teaching who Jesus said to be, what Jesus said to do, and what he said to teach. Teaching is not enough. So if your church offering is come and learn, come and learn, come and learn, come and learn, then we become spiritually obese because we're never moving to action. In fact, you can look at what a church measures to understand that you're never held accountable for not living into what you believe. You're held accountable for not attending, right? Because we want to instruct you, because teaching sound doctrine is the purpose of the church, and whether or not you go do anything to be obedient to what you've learned is completely up to you. It's completely private. There is no accountability in that. And so we have an inadvertent message within churches that say, as long as you come, absorb, and learn and go, and keep coming back and be consistent in attendance, at least with Sunday morning worship, probably not even with Sunday morning Bible class, then you're not going to make the radar of our concern. And yet you can come and make all those landmarks, all those metrics, all those milestones of weekly attendance, or even maybe miss once or twice a month and still be kind of counted as like pretty much there, and be absolutely in a wreck. Like not grow in your faith, not mature at all, not make a single disciple, because you've never been equipped or trained or expected or have been held accountable to having to do any of those things, which is what Jesus said to do. Like, so if we want to do what Jesus said to do, these are the kinds of things we're going to be doing, and teaching is part of that. But again, let's put teaching in its proper context, which is in the context of making disciples, which is in the context of the Great Commission, Matthew 28, 19 and 20. To go into all the nations, to make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I command you. It's as if we thought that making disciples was just baptizing and teaching them to know. But Jesus says, teach them to obey, teach them to do. Are we obeying? Are we doing? And who holds us accountable when we don't? Is there any expectation of actually being the disciples that Jesus was creating today? And if we're going to be that, then we're going to have to be people of, yes, sound, strong teaching, biblical teaching, and also then people who move on that teaching and obedience to that teaching out into the world to do the kinds of things that Jesus did, to be the kind of disciples Jesus made, which by its very nature makes more disciples. It's in the DNA of that approach as we listen to God and trust God and are empowered by the Spirit and being obedient to what he told us to do, like seeking and saving the lost, following the example of Jesus. Then we're going to be effective in the world at multiplication and making disciples who are like the kind of disciples that Jesus was making. So This is where we're headed. It's going to be equipping. It's going to be intentional. It's going to follow a path that you can follow, and you can take people with you. Once you follow the path, you can bring people along. We're going to walk through this together, because if you just don't know where to start, then let me help you know where to start. And if you just don't know how to do it, then let me show you how to do it. And then we can multiply practitioners so that we can impact the world with the kind of disciples that Jesus made in the first century. This is where we're headed. It's going to be quite lengthy, quite detailed, very practical, not hard, in the sense of not hard to understand. It is a difficult life to live, a cruciform life, the life that is cross-shaped in complete obedience and submission to God. That's actually a difficult journey, but Jesus says his burden is light, and that he said the Holy Spirit's going to come to help you with all of these things. So hang on, we're headed there. I'm glad you're here for the ride. There will be an occasional here or there video about a few other things. I've got a really cool video coming up on wineskin's history with Rubel Shelley and Mike Cope. That's coming up very soon. Cannot wait to share that with you. So check out this other video on discipleship, or this video on prayer walking, just to kind of get you going about some of the things we're going to be talking about. So take care.